Yeah, thank you very much. Sorry, I'm walking still to go home, so it's a bit complicated to introduce myself like this. Just maybe I'll do it in the chat when I go home. So I pass. Thank you.
All right, no worries. How about you, David? Welcome.
Thank you. My name is David Lids. I run a community in Baltimore, Maryland, where we are fixing up really distressed houses in really distressed neighborhoods, and then we're collecting those houses into what we call an impact real estate portfolio, which is owned by the workers who did the work and the tenants that are moving in and the neighbors that have been in the communities for a long time. So sort of a shared equity approach to wealth building. I think crypto offers a lot of powerful tools that would benefit us, but we're coming at this from sort of the other perspective. We have the community and not the crypto. So I'm here to learn more about how we can make use of these tools to advance our decentralized equity model.
Thank you, David. Would you mind pass it on to someone?
Sure. How about Mike?
Oh, he just said he can talk. He's at work.
Oh, okay. How about Iviangita?
Ivy, I will take it from you and just pass it again to maybe the real stone.
Hi guys, thanks for inviting us. My name's Anna Stone. I work with the Good Dollar Project, which is a crypto UBI protocol and DAO. We distribute good dollars every single day. We're looking to learn more about how we mobilize our community and looking for ways that we can work with the team at Trusted Seed on, really training our community members how to really operate within a DAO and learning curve that's required to actually go from being like a community member to an active DAO member. And so I'm just here to listen and learn. Thanks for having me. I'll pass it to one of the people who I know, Steve. I'll pass it to you.
Okay. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Stephen.
Okay. Thanks. My name is Steven. I'm from Nigeria, and I work at Good Dollar as a community manager, and focus on distributing universal basic income using decentralized protocol. And that's what I do in the space, and I'm happy to learn more about community building.
Nice. Thank you, Stephen. And how about you, Gurilla?
Hi, it's Guy Rilla, but my name is Guy. I'm the founder of Hummingbird Labs. We do it's a large creator community that is systemically supportive, a lot like a kibbutz. We have not initiated any tokenization yet. Did have spending some time as a core contributor for Source Cred, but it's been mostly about building relationships and gathering together, cultivating community around NFT projects, art specifically, but then it's bridged into other things. And now we're out sourcing funding for a commercial element that won't be governing, but it will be an aligned element to bridge Web3 with traditional commerce. Thanks. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for joining. And the Mailing Oak. Would you like to introduce yourself briefly?
I'm Lewis, and I am also part of the Good Dollar team, currently helping maintain our decentralized exchange. Thanks for having us, and I'm just hoping to learn how to become a better DAO member, how to actively contribute better towards building the community, because I believe that building the community is the biggest part of making any Web3 project successful, right?
It is. Genesi, would you like to close it up for us?
Yes. Oh, just okay. Yes. Thank you, Edu. I'm really happy about having you here today. I just want to say, hey, I'm Genesi. I'm one of the Trusted Seed Gardeners. And I'm leading, together with Ivy and others, the Unconference. I would like to also say that all the Unconference events are sponsored by Commons Stack, Tibet, General Magic, and Giga. That's those are our sponsors. Yeah, welcome everyone to this special session with Edu. So, Edu, go ahead. Thanks.
All right, so we can start this. So basically, I'm sharing my screen for those who can see it. So basically, my name is Eduardo. Nice to meet you all, including Mike and who cannot talk. So the idea of my role in this is that I've been working with the Commons Stack and the Token Engineering Commons for the past 2 years on building community for, in specifically for the TEC. This has branched out into other projects like ENS or other less common projects like OneHive. And the idea is, how do we create more sustainable projects? And in the context of beer market, how do we build a narrative that is strong and more relevant than the economic or the money talk that it's quite recurrent right now? So this presentation that you will see was first drafted for DEF CON. We run tests there, and the idea this is an ongoing research that we are aiming that eventually we can build enough data, we can build enough data points that we can use to improve and get better at community building, which is a field in the Web3 space that is not very well developed and it's lack of resources. So that's what we're trying to do here. So any feedback, any comment, I'm reading the text channel here. So if there is something due to my accent, something I did mispronounced, or something you did not understand, please don't hesitate to interrupt or raise your hand, or just type on the text channel and I can catch up to you. This is a very simple conversation that we're gonna have. This is not like I only speak and you only listen. We can make it more horizontal. So whatever you have on your mind, please feel free to share. So basically, we run through this, which is a cultural practice that we tend. Me, it's really important that for you to be part of this small community that we're having right now here. This small event, this small unconference. It's key that we acknowledge each other, which is a key principle for community building, at least on my experience. Like having and providing a space for everyone and visibility and acknowledgement to people in your community, it's key. And the way we exercise this very basic principle is through these small introductions, and just ask, why are you building? What are you doing here? And why are you here? So I can keep that in mind. For example, from what we just went through, I want to know more about Maryland, Baltimore, David Litt's project, and how do you incentivize and these folks from being owners of these spaces. The same goes for the folks from the Good Dollars project, and so on. So the idea is that I acknowledge you guys. I know you are here, and eventually we will have a conversation with you to understand a little bit more about your projects. So acknowledgement is, let's say, the icebreaker for this exercise. For those who just need a little bit more context, we are applying the new founded science of token engineering to community building. This means that the approach that we're going to take for community building is not only about the human part or the psychological part, but also the tokenization. We're going to understand how token engineering, which is a new field, is an emerging discipline, how we can design token economic systems that are in order to do so, in order to accomplish this task. This idea comes from, of course, working in the Token Engineering Commons, which deploy cultural build developed by the common stack. So it all stays in the family. And this comes, we are talking about Web3, we are talking about crypto economics, token economics, and all these fields sort of come partially from economics. And the idea is that economics is not only a mathematical science, but it's also a social science. So we also have to acknowledge the social aspect of economics, meaning that when we develop an economic system, we need to account for the people who are part of this economic system. What tends to happen in Web3 space is that we only account for people who are builders, the developers, the founders. We only account for them. So the community has very little say on these processes. But if we account for, the people who are spending your tokens, the people who are buying your tokens, the people who are contributors, and so on, we actually have a more holistic approach to this economic side, to building token economic and tokenized communities. So I want to start with this very simple question. It could be, cliche. You have found it. And that's basically someone like David. If you can talk, David, will have, and what kind of use.
Just a quick history. The history of our organization is that we we were a construction company that specialized in renovating and maintaining foreclosures for like the big banks and investors and realtors. And it's kind of a shitty space in American housing finance. And somewhere along, and one other thing, we used that construction company work to hire folks that were coming back from prison and from rehab, from struggling with addiction or trying to get off the streets and so on. So somewhere along the way, we just decided, why are we working for kind of the big banks and the federal government agencies that caused a lot of the poverty and injustice in the neighborhoods we were working in? Why don't we raise money and buy these properties and fix them up ourselves and allow the workers to own these properties? And then so we did that. We raised some money, and by now we've raised $2.5 million, and we just bought our 9th property. And we converted to an employee-owned co-op, so the workers literally do own this portfolio. And now we're engaging in a conversation about how we can distribute equity in the portfolio to the tenants who are moving in, and also to other neighborhood stakeholders. So I think that answers your question. We have a model, we have participants, we have a track record, we have some financing, but not as much as we'd want. And now we're at the point where we're trying to place a permanent kind of distribution and decentralization of the equity ownership, put that in place. So we're looking to technology, to tools that would facilitate that equity distribution and administration, and then also build in all the governance components that would go with it. How's that? Did I answer your question?
Yes, that answered my question. So you have users that are also could be members. They are implicitly members because they are being part of this co-op and so on. So they are also co-owners of the space. And your sort of question here: how do you distribute equity? My question back is, do you this is the question when we start thinking about community building, what you have a huge incentive, David, which is of course housing. What other layers of incentives do you see, or for example, could be the other way around, what are the struggles that you see people getting involved, besides the equity conversations and so on? Is there any sort of underlying problem or recurrent problem of making people involved, because if all of them are part of this co-op, I don't think everyone will want to be involved at the same level. But anyways, do you have any like sort of line on that end?
Yeah, I mean, we struggle with this every day. It's a really hard and difficult discussion. I don't even know where to begin with it, but I guess the easiest way to answer it is it's really the workers that we've hired and the tenants that we've placed, and there's some overlap in those two populations. Some workers are also tenants. Like getting them to show up to committee meetings, to governance meetings, to work sessions where we're trying to build a model to distribute equity, say, is really difficult. And then if you could just imagine what one of those meetings looked like, where you're talking about equity redistribution and what injustices you're trying to right, you can just see all the various avenues that would go out to. And so I don't even know where to begin. It's so difficult, but like, yeah, like having a discussion about redlining, which, you know, was the practice in the United States, where the financial system kept out families of color from mortgage products. Like a lot of the folks that are now the victims of that several generations down don't know the history. So man, I'm just going to shut up here. It's like there's a ton of challenges.
No worries.
Yeah.
So this is example of a very complex economic system that incorporates not only you know, a token, but also or a token or economic situation, but also involves a very deep right, and not only right, like housing should be a right, but also involves other aspects. And you are mentioning very key things that are a problem for many organizations, which is like governance. How do we incentivize participation? How do we keep people on the loop? And how do So what happens with Web3, and it's something that I mean Common Stack also has been researching on. It's governance practices and participatory practices. How we change the name of governance to decision making, and people immediately assume that they are part of the decision making, because we come from you know, a historical system that your decision making is very reduced. It's not very participatory at all, and your opinion most of the time is not asked. So in this kind of, you know, situations, David, I think it's also really and extremely helpful that people are very clear in the boundaries, which this is part where Ostrom Principles helps, having very clear boundaries and expectations, so people can know what are expected from them, and they can also share what is their intention and where do they can you know, sort of fit or meet. I think finding an incentives in your case, finding an incentive for participation into your community is a very challenging one, because you need to go an extra mile. You need to educate. It's, you know, and there's where crypto, in a high level, crypto and Web3 tools helps you to maybe not apply it specifically to your case, but it helps to underline certain values or practices that could be taken to real life in order to, you know, improve these circumstances. Like if you account for transparency, there's something we always talk here about community building. Community building not only about transparency and being, you know, having public conversations or public decision making, but it's also accessibility. It doesn't matter how much effort you put into your governance process if people doesn't understand it, if people doesn't know the repercussions, if people doesn't know where do they have to go to you know, join these meetings, if, you know, the schedule doesn't fit and you don't provide Zoom meetings. So there is a bunch of other stuff, and that's why token engineering for community building is so important, because it helps you to see not only what is obvious, like, hey, I have a meeting, you have to go. That is a sort of very binary system, but you also have to read the room and read the needs of your community in order to provide sustainability to that community. So that's a question about the first one, like how do you identify who are the members of your community? And the reason why I asked this to David, and also probably to anyone else, is the idea that with that very simple question, you do a self-check, and you're like, hey, we wanted to have, let's say, as David mentioned, we wanted to have tenants and workers, but we never expected maybe this third category that shows up, and you sort of need to adapt. So this is a sort of a self-check question that helps you to understand what do you want at the beginning and what were your goals for attaining these goals. Like you wanted to have 1,000 members, you wanted to have 50 tenants in this building that you live, and you wanted from these 50 members or 50 tenants, you wanted 25 to be engaged on governance. So that helps you to understand your sort of ecosystem and which is what are the aspects of your community. So by asking this question, you sort of map out what are the members, what are my active members, my passive members, and it helps you to see the landscape that is unfolding in your community. And it's that this has to be, as most of these practices, a recurrent practice that you put in place. Every 2 months you have to do this check. Every month you have, depending on the kind of community you have, you need to make this checking constantly in order to keep it alive and keep it moving. So that's the first. I define, and it's a very small definition, I define a member of a community by someone who agrees and engages to the layers of the community. So let's say usually in a crypto project, you have 3 layers. You have the economic layer, the governance layer, and the cultural social layer. And for example, you have tools for each one. For governance, you can use a snapshot, voting, and so on. In the economic layer, you have the token and the incentive model. And in the social layer, you have Discord calls, community calls, or like the Unconference, which is part of the social layer of the common stack. So once you decide which of these layers are important for your community, then you define the boundaries that will define membership. And my advice is always to create a holistic sort of 360 circular approach to membership. So membership means that you are involved in these layers. So you sort of, everyone who joins have to acknowledge these layers, or at least understand them. So you provide a horizontal, everyone have the same access to, same access to the same knowledge. As Anna mentioned, often you get community members that also don't agree, and that's correct, and that's healthy. The challenge here is how you incorporate that feedback and acknowledge that feedback into your community. We can no longer take the liberty to just ignore people. So how do you have mechanisms of feedback incorporated into disagreeing? You have conflict resolution. Common Stack created also the process of the gravity. It's a conflict resolution method, Anyways, so that's how I define membership for communities. And as I mentioned before, be aware of your layers. Be aware of which are the sections that determine your community. Because there could be sections that are way more important and you need to put more focus on the membership in that sense. And there are layers that are not relevant maybe at the present for that community. So choose your layers. Understand what are the main components of your community. Community, project, idea, whatever you want to call it. So in this case, as I mentioned, we have regarding the common stack, it's the easiest way since you all are here. So the common stack have a trust token. So they have a cultural and social layer that is not bounded to money, but it is a token nevertheless. That's a reputation token, which is trust token. Then, for example, you have an economic layer, which could be the membership of being part of the trusted seed. And then you have a governance layer, which is whenever the trusted seed put up a vote for something, just as an example. So they have defined these 3 layers, and then you need to prioritize which of these layers are more important. So is for you really important for people to pay the membership, meaning the economic layer, or it's really important for people to understand the social value of being part of the trusted seed. And then you have actions items attached to all of these layers. In the case of the Unconference, this Unconference is a testament of them trying to execute on the social cultural layer by building awareness by doing the Unconference. So you have actions, you always need to have actions tied to these layers in order to have in order to have the ability to get people involved. So Any question on layers before I keep going? Because I talk too much sometimes. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I keep going. So the next steps that I always suggest, I will share this presentation, by the way, on this, so no worries. But next will be choose your channels. Like, where are the conversation of your community? For example, in the case of David, it could happen on the real life sort of space where they are building and that they bought. That could be the main channel of the conversation, but also it could be, for example, that David created a Telegram channel for this community. So how do you dynamize that channel? How you take advantage of the channel to the fullest, and you have to redirect your attention to that. You need to focus on that, because for a community to be communicated, it's key. Like, you need to communicate with your community. You need to raise awareness, and there is no such thing as low effort on trying to make sure that everyone get your message across and everyone understand it. May not agree to your message, but they understand what it implies. And that's a part of transparency. Needs to equal accessibility, not just transparency. So the next aspect that I suggest when building a community, a token economic model, is what are the values that you want your project to represent. And this sounds maybe for projects who are maybe more abstract. Someone mentioned the gamification, the gaming game that Fred was doing, or the good dollar one. This may sound, in some cases, far away from what you think it's important, but having this conversation about choosing your values, elevating the conversation to your community, helps to align people. So it helps for folks, for members of your community, it helps them to get engaged, to be seen, to give their opinion on certain matters, like this one. Like, hey, we want to do an MVP. We want to understand what are the values that you guys feel identified with, and we will put that up for a vote, and everyone can propose which values are relevant for our organization. In the case of David, we could say that it's important for them to be independent, have some self-sufficiency, some decentralization level, the right of home to a home. That's also probably a value that they, it's very important for them. So how do you build? You hear your members of the community, you hear your community about these values, and then how you structure then your practices around these values, so people can be seen represented and aligned. And that's key. Like, aligned value communities are way stronger. It's way stronger than a non-value aligned community. Oh, that's nice, Fred. I didn't know it was. So Fred is sharing that the game is a tool, not a product. Thank you. Good to know. So, of course, once you have answered these questions about who, what kind of member do you have, what are your values, once you have answered this question that I talked before, the next one will be, how do you welcome new folks? How do you, even if you are not interested on onboarding new people, this practice itself is healthy, because when you build this process, you have to prepare documentation. You thank you, Anna. And if you have any other question maybe down the lane, feel free to ask it on this channel. And thank you for joining, Anna. So if you have, for example, as I was mentioning, this onboarding process, even if you have no one to onboard, the idea is that you provide documentation. You have to create documentation. You create awareness, and you create transparency also by creating this process. So it's a practice that I suggest everyone to do. Create an onboarding process. Create a process that you can understand will be the beginning point and the end point of that onboarding process. So when someone joins, what will be the next step? Where will be the next step? What are the actions? Are the actions clear for the new member? Is my information accessible, or my documentation accessible? So onboarding is really key as a tool, even as an exercise of providing information to and creating information for everyone. The next one that I always suggest is to have expectations and documentations very clear. Once you onboard or add a new member to your community, make sure that they understand not only your expectation as a community from them, but also what are their expectations from your community. If you have a huge, this applies to everyone. It could apply to a contributor. It could apply to a builder. For example, in the case of David, if you make aware like, hey, this guy wanted to build a house in a month and that's not doable. So you immediately tell him like, hey, this is not going to happen. So you create a transparency in that sense. But also, it helps to make sure that the objective of the organization, of your community are clear. So no expectations are falling apart. And of course, documentation. I simplified on understand what, how, and where. What are my, how do I, and where do I do this? So it helps to align, again, people on your community. And then for me, what is the most important part, which are the KPIs, because all these that I mentioned before are very abstract. You can interpret it as however you want, but then we have to arrive at some point, data points. We need to arrive to points of references that can help us understand if we are growing, if we are stuck, where we at. So social KPIs. For me, the social KPIs, I put some examples here. We have governance, retention, how many people shows up to your meeting, how many people through time keep showing up to your meetings, how many people vote, what is the, also if not vote, what is the apathy level of voting, how many people engage actively, how many people contribute actively. So you start taking these very basic numbers and data points. You can start progressively increasing these data points. Let's start with very simple, and these data points needs to be attached to the layers. These key layers that you decided were important for your community, they need to have KPIs, they need to have goals and a point of references that you can go back at and see like, hey, we have improved this on governance layer. Hey, we have improved this on the economic tokenized process of ours. So these KPIs needs to be put, needs to be shared, needs to be built upon, and they are tailored and should be tailored to your community. So they represent that community. Then the next step is to meet. So you've got to meet these social KPIs to your organization goal. So in the case of, let's say, we'll use the example of Common Stack, they wanted to do one conference per year. As an example, this doesn't have to be like this, but you have to make one conference per year. You have X amount of assistancy, you have X amount of speakers. So the goals of the Common Stack, let's make this up. The goals of the Common Stack as an organization, it's to have 500 membership by the end of the year. So they are doing the Unconference in order to meet that goal from the organization. And then you both then have both data points, and you in a year can see, or in a month or whatever amount of time, you can see how much you have progressed and how much these both KPIs and point of references are meeting or growing apart. You could have 2,000 people joining this conversation of the conference, but then only one became a membership. So someone is failing on that process. That process needs to be redo it, or that So you start sort of raising awareness and accountability, and you improve your internal processes. So just quickly, a few use cases. TEC and the ENSDAO, which are the two organizations where I first started to deploy this sort of tokenization awareness community building effort. And there are different cases. You have the ENSDAO, which is a huge organization, membership wise, but the DAO is very small, but is the one that has all the money. So the ENSDAO is the DAO with one of the DAOs with the highest treasury, with a fixed income about 2 million per month, and they use about 2% of that treasury. So the huge issue of the ENSDAO is how do you create awareness, and how do you onboard new people without mismanaging funds, which is the case of ENSDAO. And the case of the TEC is how do you match a very vibrant, active social layer community, but with the community goals that are not being met. So the TEC goals were not met, the intention was not met, but the social layer was really good. So how do you realign these two aspects into successful for the community, not only one of the layers? And this is again following the token economics version and vision, which is I can not only think in one layer. I have to think in all the layers that are part of my economy. and that will improve my economy. That will therefore improve my community also. So this is a little bit about the use cases. We can go deeper into this. I want to make just a quick stop to read one of the questions that was asked by Guy. I guess someone has a clear library or lexicon of models for this tokenized mechanism scenarios being created, best resources for such a resource, or there is an interest in this. Yes, we had a conversation a few days ago in the TEC to create a library of resources. Griff mentioned this. Griff Green mentioned the idea of creating a library that can store models, success cases, use cases. Also, you can follow up, Guy, the Token Engineering Academy. They also have that, and there is the Token Economics DAO. The Token Economics DAO in Twitter are sharing constantly use cases of good practices or explanation of parameters of tokens, and they have a very good. They meet, in their own model, they meet the social layer with education, and they also meet the sort of transparency parameter and so on. So Token Economics DAO in Twitter could be really good for you, Guy, to see it, and then the Token Engineering Commons or the Token Engineering Academy. If you don't have or know those projects, let me know so I can share you the link. Oh, I meant more financing for mass adoption. It's tricky because we need to first get better at explaining this. We need to get better at testing out these models first within communities to later on export this as a success. Right now, we always take the risk that experimentation is really nice, but yet again, it's experimentation. So we need to test it out, and there has not passed enough time to see the impact actually of tokenization in communities in the long run. So we are still figuring out which are the practices that work best. Does that answer your question, Guy? Okay, perfect. So I will open the floor because I don't want to make this a monologue. I want to open the floor. I will count down to 0. Anyone can unmute and ask any question that you may have. I'm intentionally leaving the parameter setting and the token economics economic part specific out of this conversation because I want you to abstract for a moment from the money and just focus on how you can strengthen your community in other aspects. And then we can talk about token economics, and then we can talk about how your token will be parameterized, how it will behave, how do I create incentive models. But incentive models should come after you have a strong sense of your community. If you don't have that, it doesn't matter how good your token is, how good your strategy is economically wise, it will not be sustainable. So, or it could be if you maybe be a very successful project. So yeah. So I will count down to 0, and whenever you have a question, you mute yourself and ask right away. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All right. If there is no question, you can reach me out here in Discord or in Telegram. This is an ongoing research, so if you apply any of this or you are interested in more feedback, you can write to me in Telegram or Twitter, and I'm here to help you. So maybe back to you, Janacy.
Okay, yes. Thank you so much. I mean, this is such a great presentation, and this is pure gold. Thank you so much, Edu, for being our host today. So I think if there's no questions, we can just close this session. And yeah, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you everyone for your time, and I look forward to see you around. And anything else, please send me a message and we'll be around. Take care, everyone.